The other woman, Nichol Kessinger in the Chris Watts case, an extended deep dive. The shadow of a crime. They say every crime tells more than one story. In the chilling case of Chris Watts, who murdered his pregnant wife Shannon and their two daughters Bella and Celeste in August 2018, one figure looms large in the narrative, yet remains elusive: Nichol Kessinger. She wasn't at the crime scene. She didn't pull the trigger or wield the weapon. Yet, her role as Chris Watts' mistress has made her a lightning rod for speculation, blame, and intrigue. How does a workplace fling become a catalyst for one of the most shocking family annihilations in recent American history? Was Nichol Kessinger an unwitting participant in a deadly game, or did her presence ignite a spark that led to unimaginable horror? This deep dive explores her story, dissecting her relationship with Chris, her actions before and after murders, and the lingering questions that keep her name tethered to this tragedy. Buckle up for an in-depth journey into a saga of deception, betrayal, and the devastating ripple effects of a single affair. Let's unravel the enigma of Nichol Kessinger. Sparks in the office, the genesis of an affair. In the summer of 2018, the offices of Anadarko Petroleum in Colorado were the unassuming backdrop for a connection that would alter lives forever. Nichol Kessinger, a contracted environmental technician, and Chris Watts, a field operator, crossed paths in a setting defined by spreadsheets, safety protocols, and corporate routine. Yet, beneath the surface of this professional environment, something deeply personal was brewing. Nichol, in her late 20s, was intelligent, driven, and by all accounts, unaware of the storm she was stepping into. Chris, 33, presented himself as a reserved, charming everyman, a father of two who claimed his marriage was crumbling. According to Nichol's later statements to police, Chris told her in June 2018 that he was in the final stages of a divorce from his wife, Shannon. He painted a picture of an amicable split, a man ready to move on, free of baggage except for his love for his daughters, Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3. Their early interactions were innocuous. Casual chats by the coffee machine, shared glances during meetings. But these moments soon escalated into flirtations. By July, they were texting regularly, meeting outside of work, and diving headfirst into a clandestine relationship. Nichol later described Chris as attentive and kind, a man who seemed genuinely invested in her. He was convincing, spinning a narrative that made his availability seem plausible. But the truth was far darker. Chris wasn't separated. He was still living with Shannon, who was 15 weeks pregnant with their third child, a boy they planned to name Nico. The couple shared a home in Frederick, Colorado, filled with family photos and the trappings of suburban life. Chris's lie was the foundation of his affair with Nichol, a deception that would soon spiral into catastrophe. A double life, the fantasy takes shape. As the summer progressed, Chris and Nichol's relationship intensified. They went on secret dates to restaurants and bars, spent nights together, and exchanged thousands of texts, many of which were later revealed in police reports. Nichol sent Chris photos, some intimate, and he reciprocated with messages that suggested a future together. To Nichol, this was a budding romance with a man on the cusp of freedom. To Chris, it was an escape from a life he was beginning to resent. Chris's behavior began to shift noticeably. He started working out obsessively, shedding weight, and adopting a more polished appearance. Colleagues noticed his newfound confidence, a stark contrast to the quiet, unassuming operator they'd known. At home, however, he was pulling away from Shannon. She confided in friends that Chris was emotionally distant, often dismissing her attempts to connect. She attributed it to stress, perhaps from their financial struggles or her demanding career as a multi-level marketing representative. But the truth was, Chris was pouring his energy into Nichol, crafting a fantasy life where he could start anew. His phone told the story. He deleted messages to cover his tracks, searched for romantic getaways, and even looked up jewelry, hinting at a future he envisioned with Nichol. Meanwhile, Shannon was planning a gender reveal party for their unborn son, unaware that her husband was slipping further into a double life. Nichol later told investigators that she pressed Chris about his divorce, asking for details to confirm his story. He assured her that the paperwork was in progress, that he and Shannon were living separately within their home, and that the marriage was effectively over. Nichol believed him, or wanted to. In the haze of new romance, red flags can be easy to ignore, and Chris was a master at keeping them hidden. The tipping point, a marriage under pressure. By late July 2018, Shannon was sensing cracks in her marriage. She sent Chris long, heartfelt texts, pleading for him to open up, to fight for their family. She was confused by his coldness, especially as they prepared for the arrival of their third child. Chris, meanwhile, was spending more time with Nichol, including a weekend in late July when Shannon was away on a business trip. They went hiking, dined out, and spent uninterrupted time together, a taste of the life Chris seemed to crave. During this period, Nichol began to notice inconsistencies in Chris's demeanor. He'd occasionally seem distracted, his responses curt or evasive. She attributed it to the stress of his supposed divorce. But something felt off. In early August, with Shannon still out of town, Chris and Nichol's time together intensified. They spent a week in her apartment, and their texts grew more intimate, filled with plans for a future unencumbered by his past. But back at home, Shannon was growing suspicious. She checked their joint bank account and noticed charges for meals and outings that didn't align with Chris's explanations. She confronted him, but he deflected, claiming they were work-related expenses. Shannon's friends later revealed she was beginning to suspect infidelity, though she had no concrete proof. The tension in the Watts household was palpable, a ticking time bomb that Chris was doing nothing to defuse. The murders, a timeline of tragedy. On August 12, 2018, Shannon returned from a business trip in Arizona. She arrived home in the early hours of August 13th, dropped off by a friend. What happened next remains one of the most horrifying sequences in modern true crime history. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, Chris strangled Shannon in their bedroom. He then smothered his daughters, Bella and Celeste, and loaded their bodies into his truck. He drove to a remote oil site owned by Anadarko, where he disposed of Shannon's body in a shallow grave and dumped the girls' bodies in oil tanks. During this time, Nichol was unaware of the nightmare unfolding. She and Chris texted throughout the weekend, their messages casual and romantic. On August 12th, while Shannon was still in Arizona, Nichol and Chris spent time together, blissfully unaware, or so Nichol claims, of the tragedy about to strike. On the morning of August 13th, as Shannon's friend reported her missing, Chris texted Nichol, acting as if nothing was wrong. He even appeared on local news, pleading for his family's safe return, his demeanor eerily calm. Nichol's suspicions grew that day. She noticed Chris seemed unusually composed for a man whose family had vanished. She began searching online, looking up news reports about the missing Watts family. She found Shannon's social media, filled with glowing posts about her life with Chris and their daughters. The pieces weren't adding up. By August 14th, Nichol was piecing together a grim picture. She searched terms like "man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife" and "how to prepare for a divorce," indicating she was grappling with the reality of Chris's lies. On August 15th, Nichol made a pivotal decision. She contacted the Frederick Police Department. She turned over her phone, including texts, photos, and search history, and sat for multiple interviews. She told detectives she had no idea Shannon was pregnant or that Chris was still fully entangled in his marriage. Her cooperation was immediate and extensive, but it wasn't enough to shield her from the storm that followed. The Interrogations, Nichol under the microscope. Nichol's interviews with police, later released to the public, reveal a woman grappling with shock and guilt. She described Chris as a liar who had manipulated her into believing his marriage was over. "I thought about her a lot," she said of Shannon, her voice breaking. "I would never do that to another woman, especially one who was pregnant." She insisted she had no inkling of Chris's plans, no reason to suspect he was capable of such violence. Her phone records corroborated much of her story. Text showed Chris reassuring her about his divorce, deflecting questions about his home life. But some details raised eyebrows. Her search history included queries about high-profile mistresses, like Amber Fry, the woman linked to Scott Peterson in the Lacey Peterson murder case. She also searched for information on polygraph tests and how to handle media attention, suggesting she feared the spotlight that was about to engulf her. Investigators pressed Nichol on her timeline, her knowledge of Chris's family, and whether she ever suspected he was lying. She maintained she was blindsided, but her emotional delivery, sometimes tearful, sometimes defensive, fueled skepticism. Some detectives noted she seemed more concerned about her own reputation than the victim's, though others saw her as a young woman caught in a nightmare she didn't create. The court of public opinion, vilified or victimized. As the Watts case exploded into a national sensation, Nichol Kessinger became a lightning rod for public outrage. True crime enthusiasts, social media sleuths, and media outlets dissected her every move. Reddit threads and YouTube channels buzzed with theories. Was she complicit? Did she know more than she let on? Some accuse her of orchestrating the murders. Others of pushing Chris to eliminate his family to clear the way for their relationship. Her search history didn't help. Queries like, can cops trace deleted texts, and how to deal with an affair being exposed were seen as damning, though Nichol insisted they reflected her panic after learning the truth. The comparisons to Amber Fry were relentless, with many branding her as a homewrecker who drove Chris to kill. Yet, unlike Fry, who testified against Scott Peterson, Nichol's cooperation with police was less publicized, leaving her vulnerable to speculation. The backlash was relentless. Nichol received death threats. Her personal details were doxxed, and her reputation was shredded. By late 2018, she had left her job at Anadarko, changed her name, and reportedly entered a witness protection program. Her life, like those of the Watts family, was irrevocably altered. The psychological puzzle, motive or muse? Chris Watts pleaded guilty to the murders in November 2018, sparing Nichol from testifying in court. He was sentenced to life without parole, and his confession laid bare the chilling details of his actions. But the question of why lingers, and Nichol's role in his psyche remains a point of contention. Criminologists and psychologists have debated whether Nichol was a motive, a trigger, or simply a convenient excuse. Some argue the affair provided Chris with an emotional escape, a fantasy of a new life unburdened by financial strain, fatherhood, or a strained marriage. Others suggest that Nichol's presence amplified his dissatisfaction, making his family feel like an obstacle to his happiness. In his confession, Chris admitted he wanted a fresh start with Nichol, though he never claimed she encouraged the murders. Nichol's defenders point out that she was manipulated by a skilled liar. Chris's ability to compartmentalize, playing the doting husband at home while wooing Nichol, suggests a level of sociopathy that Nichol couldn't have anticipated. Yet critics argue that her failure to question Chris's story more aggressively, or to notice the red flags, made her complicit in a passive sense. Did she ignore signs because she was in love, or was she simply naive? The truth likely lies in a gray area. Nichol didn't plan or commit the murders, but her presence gave Chris a vision of a life he was willing to kill for. It's a sobering reminder of how affairs, when fueled by deception, can ripple into devastating consequences. The aftermath, a life in hiding. Today, Nichol Kessinger remains a ghost. Reports suggest she relocated, possibly under a new identity, to escape the relentless scrutiny. Her whereabouts are unknown, her social media presence erased. For a woman who once lived an ordinary life, the Watts case has left an indelible mark, branding her as the other woman in a tragedy that shocked the world. The public's fascination with her endures. Documentaries, podcasts, and true crime specials continue to dissect her role, often painting her as either a villain or a victim. Some see her as a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting too easily, others as a scapegoat for a man's monstrous actions. For Shanann's family, Nichol remains a painful footnote. They've expressed sympathy for her, acknowledging that Chris's lies ensnared her too. Yet, the loss of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico overshadows any narrative about Nichol, a reminder that the true victims are those who pay the ultimate price. Lessons from the shadows. What can we learn from Nichol Kessinger's story? It's a stark reminder that no crime exists in isolation. Peripheral figures, like mistresses or confidants, can become entangled in ways they never foresee. Nichol's affair with Chris was built on lies, but also exposed the fragility of trust and the devastating power of manipulation. Her experience also highlights the double-edged sword of public fascination with true crime. While it fuels accountability and awareness, it can also destroy lives caught in the crossfire. Nichol didn't choose to be infamous, but the internet age ensured she'd never escape the spotlight. Finally, her story underscores the complexity of human relationships. Affairs are rarely simple, and when they intersect with minds like Chris Watts, the results can be catastrophic. It's a warning to look closer, to question narratives, and to recognize that love, when built on deception, can lead to unthinkable ends. The questions that haunt. Nichol Kessinger's role in the Chris Watts case raises questions that may never be fully answered. Did she truly believe Chris was divorcing? Were there red flags she ignored in the heat of romance? Could she have done anything to stop the tragedy? Her story is a lens into the darker corners of human behavior, where lies, desire, and desperation collide. It's a reminder that even those on the fringes of a crime can carry its weight forever. If this deep dive has left you pondering, share your thoughts below. What do you think of Nichol's role? Was she a victim of Chris's manipulation? Or did she play a larger part than she admits? Stay curious, stay safe, and join us for more stories that unravel the mysteries of the human psyche.